All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show. I'm Mark Wallace. Your host and facilitator of this week's edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, wherever you get your, and hopefully you tune into the program. So we are looking forward to you being here. And of course, our phone number is 951-221-8221. We'll be picking up your phone calls a little bit later on in the program. So we want for you to chime in. We're going to be talking about, of course, the election we're going to be talking about. And I have a guest who's going to be coming on talking with us in the 7:30 hour, talking about all of these weight loss medications that people are doing and the surgeries that you're doing. So she's going to come on. She's an expert in the field, and she's going to be talking with us about that and how to avoid some of the risks that goes along with it. I know that obesity is a big problem, and it certainly has been a growing problem within the Black community over the past 35 years, that we have increasingly become, unfortunately, a leading demographic in obesity, which leads to a number of other health challenges, such as diabetes and heart disease and that sort of thing. So we're going to be talking with her in the 7:30 hour. And of course, with all of the negativity that's going on, but let me first thank all of you who sent your warm well wishes to me and my family, of course, on the loss of our niece and my niece, my great niece and my niece's daughter and my nephew's daughter. We honored her and celebrated her life on this past weekend, which was very difficult, very tragic for us to have to funeralize a 23-year-old, and we are facing this thing called depression, which is a real thing, and I think in our community we need to deal with the reality of that and not stigmatize it as being something wrong with you as though it's your fault. It is a challenge just like any other illness, but it can be treated. There are plenty of people who are having very successful lives that are receiving therapy and having to do the work so that they can go on and have a great productive life. We're going to be talking with some experts about that in the coming weeks, about depression and about getting the kinds of support that one will need when it comes to mental challenges. So I want to thank you all for that. But I also want to encourage you to stay positive, really to stay encouraged no matter what is going on. And one of the things that I do is that whenever I have a negative moment or a negative thought, I also fill it with a positive thought. And positivity will always subvert and counter negativity. So it's just an exercise that I use. And sometimes when I'm feeling down, I will go outside and just look straight up into the sky. I promise you, if you do this, if you're having a moment where you're not feeling good about yourself or you're not feeling good about something, if you go outside and just look up to the sky, it's going to change your entire perspective. It will change your entire perspective. You can even do it in your home, because if you look up towards the heavens, everything in the heavens is good. And it will change your entire perspective. So we need to offer each other the tools that we use that work in terms of putting us more into a positive state with all of the negativity that's going on, and certainly with the negativity that's being sold in our political climate at this moment that is just Um, uh, One person in particular who is trying to sell fear, trying to sell despair, trying to sell division, trying to get us to disengage, but we cannot be turned around. Cannot allow him to divide us, cannot allow him to give us this despair and disinformation, any of that. All of those D's, we cannot allow for him to win. So we have to doom that. So we're going to talk about that and talk about the importance of it. I was down in Florida this past weekend, and there's a place called Homestead, Florida, which is in the very southern part of Miami, headed towards the Keys. And I have a niece who lives in Homestead, so I took her home. Her and the kids took them home on this weekend, Saturday, and I stopped because there was a guy there who um, makes great barbecue, and I always get some of his barbecue when I go home and visit. But he moved from his other location further south, so I was able to stop there, and he asked me a question about what's going on in the world of politics and what did I think about it and what do I think about black people who are supporting Trump, because he has a brother who is MAGA on steroids. And he was like, well, how do you talk with people like that? And I know that question is one that you have to wrestle with. I had to wrestle with it and try to figure out how to provide information, because I am a political junkie. I'm just a political junkie, and to the point to where I think it's important to know what's going on so that I could share information with you, the audience, and share information with other people who may not be as interested in understanding how the government actually works and understanding the difference between what's actually factual and what's actually false and what's going on. So they don't really pay that much attention. Not that they don't care, but they're not as involved. But I think that, as you've heard me say time and time again, that if you are on airways, if you have a platform where people are tuning in to your program, you have a duty to provide people with information, correct information. You have a duty to make sure that whatever information that you are providing, it is accurate, factual information. So I said to him, rather than trying to argue with your brother about a position or a person, find out from your brother, ask him questions if he's certainly willing to have a conversation with you. Find out from him what is important to him. What are the three areas that are important to him, whatever they are? And then once you find out what those three areas of importance are, then you can share with him which side supports and wants to protect those issues that are important to your brother. Then he will be able to, or they will be able to, make a determination based on factual information rather than what they're being sold on and being promoted in the performance of one. So that is one of the best ways to do that. If they're really interested, and there are things that, and everybody has something that's really important to them, whatever it is, whatever your issue of importance is, whatever the top three things that are important to you, whatever they may be, then you find out what those are, and then you show them which side of the aisle in the political spectrum are interested in protecting and advancing those issues that are important to that person. And then that's the way that they will vote. I find that more often times than not, that when we have that kind of comprehensive, substantive discussion, and you're providing those facts to people, you're able to help them make a clear choice. Sometimes that clear choice is changing from where they actually are. So we definitely want to make sure that you have those tools to use so that you don't get into unnecessary quibbles. Because if you get into this conversation about personality, you're never going to win that argument, because you both sides have your stance and opinion on personalities. But when you talk about the facts are the facts. Now, there may be varying different ways that people would like to approach them, but the facts are the facts. Now, if people are not willing to accept facts, there's not much that you can say or conversations you can have with them in the face of that. It is critical. The election is very important, and there are some critical things that the next president of the United States will be probably doing and having the power to do. Now, some people have been listening to number 45 and all of his crude and nasty rhetoric. Now, let me just say, for my own disclosure, what he represents as quote unquote man talk, he doesn't represent me. In fact, he doesn't represent me in any way, shape, or form in terms of character, in terms of conscience, certainly in terms of courage. There's nothing about him that represents me. The only thing that we have in common is that we are both males, period. But outside of that, he doesn't have a value, and he certainly doesn't have a position that represents me. And the idea to suggest that all men talk the way he talks is simply just not true. It is just not true. And there, even though there are some men who do talk like that, but at least they have enough discretion not to have those kinds of remarks in front of children or in front of other women, or certainly in front of other people who may not have appreciation for that or are very offended by it. So, and of course, you've heard all of it, and I'm not going to play them. I have the clips, but I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to, in my little space, I am not going to give that oxygen. You hear it enough, you've seen it enough, and you will continue to see it enough on all of the mainstream media, and we'll let them do that. But what I want to talk to you about are those things that are actually important, and so that, but one of the things that I am hopeful about to see Democrats and Republicans and independents working together, it is my hope that when Kamala Harris becomes the 47th president of the United States, that we can, and I say finally, because there were some things in the past, but going forward, that we can have people who might call themselves Republicans, who might call themselves Democrats or independents or whatever flag that people fly under, that we can agree that we will sit down to solve problems, because it doesn't matter what your label is. When there is a problem, the problem has to be solved. And it's not a Democratic problem. It's not a Republican problem. It is a people problem. And we have to, and people have to come up with the solution of the problem for other people. Had a conversation with a gentleman last week who we owned a unit in the same condo building, which was only 3 units in the building. He owned one, I owned one, and there was a third owner. And we were having some challenges with the third owner. And we ended up having to go to court to sue the third owner for their assessments that they refused to pay. And they refused to comply with the bylaws of the condo association. So he and I had to resolve problems. Now, he leans conservative, as the way that he describes himself, and I lean more liberal. All right, just so that we can kind of set the stage. But I really lean to what is solving the problem to improve the lives of people, whatever that is. So, but we worked together and realized that we had to come together because the third person wasn't paying. We had to come together, one from the left, one from the right. We had to come together and put our money, and the money doesn't say left, nor does it say right. It just takes care of the problem. We had to put our money together to resolve the problems that the third person, for whose political position we don't know and don't care, they were creating a problem, but he and I had to come together and solve the problem. And never once in 5 years did we come together and say, this is the conservative way, and I think that we should solve the problem, or that this is the Democratic way, the left liberal way, and I think that we should solve the problem this way. What we did was we said, got to solve the problem. It's going to require some money. We have to put the money in to solve the problem. We put the money in so that we can meet the needs of the building to protect everybody's interest. And we did that, never having a conversation about whether he's a Republican, whether I'm a Democrat, whether he's liberal or conservative, I'm liberal. Never once did we have that conversation. What we did is we had to identify that we had a problem, and in order for us to protect the interest of the whole, we had to come together with the solution for the problem. So I eventually sold my unit, but we stay in contact. In fact, he called me, and I happened to have had a spare key that they needed, and met with him, and of course started having a conversation and started talking a little bit about what's going on in the election. It's kind of hard not to. And so he started saying, well, you know, I lean more conservative. I told my daughter that she should, you know, look at things and make her own decision, up, get the information, that sort of thing. And then he said, I think, you know, somewhere we need to be in the middle. And I said to him, I said, you know, you and I, well, before that, I said, I think that we just need to solve problems, whether that's on the left, whether it's on the right, whether it's in the middle, whether it's off center, wherever it is, the solution is, that's what we need to be looking for. And so I pointed him to the fact that, you know, you and I had a problem in a building that we owned a unit in, and one of the persons were not living up to their obligation. And as a result of that, you and I had to pick up the slack. So you and I picked up the slack and solved the problem. Never once did we sit down to a table with a sign in front of us that says one was a conservative, one was a liberal, one was a Republican, one was a Democrat. We just said we have a problem, we have to solve the problem. And we figured out how to solve the problem and what we needed to do, and we then solved the problem. So it is not whether you are a conservative, it's not whether you are a Republican. It is that if we have problems, the way that I look at this, I'm a Democrat. And some people would like to label me as liberal. Fine, label me as liberal. But the point that I'm making is the two of us got together because we own this property and we own a unit in this property, and we got together and we solved the problems. We never once had a conversation about being conservative, being liberal or progressive or Democrat or Republican. We solved problems that we had. That's precisely what we did. So I reminded him of this, and this went on more than 5 or 6 years. But I reminded him that the problems that we have, he and I never had to put a pin on what our political affiliation was. And even if we did, even if we had done that, that would not have solved the problem. At the end of the day, we still would have had the problem if we did not come together to resolve the problem that we had. So, so I reminded him of that. And this was not just a lesson for him, it was a lesson for both of us, because it was just something I started thinking about. I was like, we solve those problems and we never talk about whether being a Democrat or a Republican or a conservative or progressive or liberal. We just solve the problem. And so my point is this, is that never in the history of my lifetime, I'm 64 years old, never in the history of my lifetime have I ever seen a campaign that one side decides that, you know what, it's best for us to represent and to support this because this is the best thing for the country right now. It is my hope and it is my prayer that that will be the successful run, that we will have people who are working together despite what their political affiliation or what their philosophy is, but that what they know that needs to be done, that's right, that's correct and appropriate for the United States of America, for the people of this country. And that we all agree, and that following that same spirit of cooperation will continue to where we can chart a path that we have never been down, or a path that maybe we've been down, and make it better, that people can have their political approach, but they have the willingness to come together and say, you know what, my party, my political affiliation, that's what it is. My philosophy, this is what it is. But we, and on both sides, we can come together and we can say, what is the best path for us to chart with any circumstance? That would be transformational. That will be transformational. So that is what my hope is in this election, that we see coming out of this election, to really turn the page on people who want to be destructive and people who just want to blow things up and people who just don't want to face the truth, that those Democrats, Republicans, and independents can sit with each other and say, let's solve problems. Because there are more There's more that we have in common than that we disagree on. The things that we disagree on, we find a path. We figure out a way to negotiate those things. But let's work and chart a new course forward on the things that we agree on so that we can improve the conditions of this country that all of us call home, and this country that we love, and the country so that it works for everyone. And we can turn the page forever from the one who has other motivations that are not productive for the country or for the world at large, for that matter. That's what I am hoping. And that's what I am really loving about what is happening. You know, God is such an awesome power and spirit that he shows us and demonstrates to us how, even through some very negative things, how, he can chart a different path. None of us, before 70 some odd days ago, would ever thought that we would be here in the position that we are, with having a Democratic nominee and with having loads and loads of Republicans and independents supporting the Democratic nominee. The Democratic nominee is going to work hard, but it would be such a phenomenal thing that post this election that we will be able to see Democrats, Republicans, and independents working together to solve problems, rather than what we see one person trying to sell, divide, disconnect, and disengage us from the process of making the country better. That's what I love seeing in what I see happening in this election. People working together for what's better for the country, despite their political affiliation. That is the direction that I think that we need to go. And I hope that people who are Democrats and Republicans that are friends, that have lost the ability to be able to communicate with each other. Thanksgiving is coming up. I hope that you all would be able to go back to sharing a meal together and being able to laugh and have a conversation and be respectful, and talk about how you can chart paths forward and do away with the spirit that this person has brought in to divide us and to have us bickering with each other over some things that just we shouldn't be bickering about. But we can put and chart a new path forward. And I believe that Democrats and Republicans are doing just that in this campaign. I think that, so it is bigger than the election. The election is important, but it's bigger than that. And I'm hoping that we get to that point, that we continue that point. I hope that we don't have an election, Kamala Harris gets elected, and then we go back to our corners and start, fighting all over. That would be counterproductive. I hope that we can go forth and we can say, you know what, we're turning the page, on this loyalism to partisanship, even when it's not right. And then we're going to chart a new path forward. All right. Now, I hope that you will do the same thing, that you will rise above any of that and accept what is decent and accept what is true in the discipline and character and courage and consciousness of what is right and appropriate. That should be your litmus test, period. not what corner you sit in. All right. All right. Listen, we're going to move forward into our next segment, which I am very excited about. And we have a guest that is coming on to talk with us about this. And I have some familiarity with it because I know a few people who have been challenged with this. And we are going to be talking about it. And so, as the holidays season is approaching us, many people are seeking to, lose weight and looking for these quick fix solutions. But experts warn that the popular GLP-1 inhibitors may carry hidden risks, including muscle loss and mental health side effects. With an estimated 100 million Americans struggling with obesity and turning to experimental weight loss drugs like GLP-1 inhibitors, including Ozempic and Wegovy, could they be trading in pounds for health problems? Well, my guest, who is a pharmacist and integrative health expert, Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz, is joining me, and she is going to give us a breakdown on all of this. Welcome to the program, Dr. Diaz. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you very much for being here. This is a very important topic, and I think that people really need to know. And I think that this is also a form of mental health. This impacts a form of mental health. Unfortunately, my family is going through a very traumatic experience where we lost a niece by suicide last week.
I'm so sorry.
I was 23 years old because of depression, and I think that there is interactive or certainly integrative type solutions for all of this. So give us a little background on what you do and this problem.
Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned, so I'm an integrative pharmacist, so conventionally trained as a pharmacist. Then after that, pursued postdoctoral residency training. So that's additional training after my doctorate to investigate integrative medicine. And integrative medicine, has a lot of different definitions. And so the way that I define it is, how can I look at the quality of life for a patient and improve it? And so this could be a combination of prescription medications, of supplements, nutritional interventions, movement, mindfulness, and of course, approaching mental health. So it's all of these things combined. And so was able to do that. And now I have the pleasure of working with companies that are looking to forge that forward and thinking about patient first.
What are some of the major red flags that we should look for?
In GLP-1s?
Yes.
Yeah, so in GLP-1 inhibitors, I would say there are 4 major red flags. The first one is gastrointestinal issues or GI upset. So that's anything to do with your stomach. So that could be nausea, vomiting, constipation, diarrhea, and even it could lead to when the stomach doesn't empty properly. So that could lead to chronic digestive problems. So that's one. The second one is accelerated muscle loss. So even if the person has only been taking the GLP-1 inhibitor for a short period of time, with this weight loss, they likely will experience weight loss. But this weight loss is actually a combination of fat and muscle loss. And so that's something to be aware of. And then the other 2 are off-label misuse. So that just means, that the drug is being prescribed to people in a way that it's not actually FDA approved. And then the last one, of course, that we touched on briefly is mental health side effects.
Can you define for us so that we just don't assume that people know what GLP-1 stands for and what that means?
Yes, absolutely. So GLP-1 drugs is, so initially they were FDA approved. So actually I should go back even further than that. So GLP-1 drugs is a category of medications, and they were initially investigated for their use in diabetes management. So that's initially, the first research, why they came onto the scene, so to speak. And Ozempic in particular is FDA approved for diabetes management, specifically type 2 diabetes management. And it's not considered what, we call first line. So it's not, you're diagnosed with diabetes, then all of a sudden you're given this GLP-1 inhibitor. It's actually first you're given metformin, you might be given other classes of diabetes medications, and then after that, as a second or third line, depending on the patient, then a GLP-1 will be incorporated into their regimen. So that's for Ozempic, for example. Once they did the research on Ozempic, and they saw, by they I mean the pharma companies, they found out, oh wow, we're seeing really incredible weight loss in these patients, which was at that point a side effect. They were not looking to use these products for weight loss. Some of the companies came out with another version of this medication, the same active ingredient, semaglutide, with another branded name. So Wegovy is the one I'm talking about in this case. There are some other drugs that are in this category as well, considered GLP-1 inhibitors. They're different active ingredients and different branded names. But Wegovy is actually FDA approved for weight loss, but only for specific patient populations. So you either have to have a BMI of 27 plus comorbid conditions. So that's having other chronic diseases that are exacerbating the diabetic condition, or you need to have a BMI of above 30. And so it's really one of those two, and you have to fall in those parameters. So that's what I meant by off-label use, is that oftentimes people who don't fall into those two, subcategories, or who don't even have diabetes, oftentimes for Ozempic's case, they are being, prescribed these medications.
Well, there are people, like we said in the introduction, I know people who have had they've had weight problems, and some people were morbidly obese, and there are others who, what I would just call a little vain overweight. But and it's almost seemed like it's fashionable for people to go and do some of these, use some of these inhibitors and that sort of thing, without really fully understanding the side effects. Why is that important for people to know that?
So it's important to know that these side effects are possible because these side effects are very frequent. It's not like these are rare. And so a lot of the research is ongoing. But, for example, if a patient is taking the products, even for a short period of time, any of these, potential issues could be a problem for them. So that's, again, the GI issues, so the stomach issues, the accelerated weight loss, the accelerated muscle loss specifically, and then the potential impact on mental health.
Yeah, well, and certainly part of that issue is that people want to lose weight rapidly, and of course, like you said about the diminution of the muscle mass, and which you would think when you are thinking about it is going to be pretty obvious, but it could also, I would imagine, could have some reversal effects in terms of you starting to, with depression, so to speak, when you start to realize that, you've lost all of this weight, but now what do you do with this? That you have this idea in your mind that if you lose all this weight, you're going to have a certain physical appearance, but you don't have that, and you have to do some other things. So it causes problems. What do you say, and what is the path that people should take?
Yes. So I think it has to be this multifaceted approach. Again, as an integrative health specialist, it's something I'm always thinking about, this whole person approach of what are all the different facets that make up this person. So thinking about their daily life, what are they including from a nutrition perspective? I always recommend, eating small, frequent meals and focusing on whole foods. So things where you're not, grabbing your hand and putting it into a bag, but, thinking about the perimeter of the grocery store. So when it comes to nutrition, things like that, prioritizing fiber, prioritizing protein, all of those things are important and consider, and always you should take into consideration. In addition to that, we have to think about movement. So, what sort of movement works best for you? I always say, start with a walk, take your dog on a walk, walk around the block, whenever you can. So it's how do you incorporate movement? So that's a component of it. Another thing, especially if you're, taking these GLP-1 inhibitors or these GLP-1 blockers, is to think about, apart from the diet and the movement, we also need to think about, what sort of dietary supplements could be a good fit. Because we can do all these things for muscle health and muscle preservation, but sometimes you just need a little bit additional help. And so the things that I generally recommend, I would say 4 supplements that I think are key would be omega-3 fatty acids, which we might already be getting from our foods, but also great in supplement form. This can help reduce muscle inflammation and support protein synthesis. Branch chain amino acids, so that's leucine in particular, but there are quite a few other amino acids that come in a capsule format, so that can prevent muscle breakdown. If you don't feel like you're getting enough protein from your diet, again, with taking GLP-1s and having potential, accelerated muscle loss, then I would always recommend some sort of high quality protein powder. You can do plant-based, you can do whey-based, whatever works best for you. And then the other supplement that I would recommend is called fortotropin. And so it's a natural compound that's derived from fertilized egg yolk. And in a clinical trial, it was shown that it boosted muscle protein synthesis by 18% in adults that were not exercising. And so this product is called Myos MD. You can only get it through your healthcare provider. And I actually work with them as a medical advisor to help educate doctors and people in general on the benefits of fortotropin, especially in the context of GLP-1s.
So what kind of diet changes can people, or would you recommend that people would use so that they don't have those complications, or
Yes.
certainly to reduce those?
Yeah, so I briefly mentioned that, but happy to go into it even further. So, when we're thinking about taking GLP-1s, a lot of the time when we're taking them, like if people are taking them, it not only deals with your satiety center. So satiety is, how full you're feeling. The satiety centers are also very close to your dopamine, your dopamine neurotransmitters, which is known for reward. And so oftentimes patients that are taking these medications, they lose the excitement around eating. And because they don't feel like eating as much because they get full quicker. But then also they're not really enjoying that much anymore. So I would say stick to foods that, again, are whole foods and small, frequent meals, things that you enjoy, because you might not be hungry all the time and you might not want to eat a lot of food. And so just prioritizing things that taste good to you, that are healthy, again, thinking about the perimeter of the grocery store. And then I'm always thinking about, like, when you're looking at your plate, how many colors can you count? Is so simple. So I love a combination of those things. And if you need to, always seek guidance from, someone who has nutrition expertise so they can best guide you on, this is the optimal amount of protein you should be getting. This is the optimal amount of carbs, because we don't want to forget carbs. Good carbs are great. And then we also want to think about healthy fats.
So, I see these commercials all the time, the Ozempic and Wegovy. I mean, they are almost seeming to be on every other commercial. Almost worse than political ads. But, for people who don't do a lot of exercise and people who typically are very overweight, don't do a lot of physical exercise. And when they go through, or they're taking this, you don't hear the balance approach to this, right? Rather than the extreme, because it seems that, you hear this and it's almost like a kid, looking for Christmas to come, that you have this Santa Claus approach, that it's just going to be this magical, reduction and everything is going to be okay. What do you say to those people that, they should be cautious about taking that kind of approach or having those kinds of expectations?
Yeah, I think anything with a quick fix is not something that's going to last. is what I would tell them. And so, yes, you might lose the weight quickly, but research has also shown that once people stop taking the drug, they get what's called rebound weight gain. And so they oftentimes not only gain back the pounds that they lost, they also gain back more. And so I would say, it seems great, quick fix, but are you committed to taking it for the rest of your life? And oftentimes patients say no, because they don't want to continue taking it. They want the quick fix, but then they want to get off of it. And that's something I've seen time and time again of people saying, I achieved my goal weight, and then they stop taking it, and then they unfortunately gain the weight back and potentially then some. So I would say that quick fixes sound great. And whenever something sounds too good to be true, oftentimes it is. And so it's all about a stepwise approach and looking at how you can slowly but effectively change your lifestyle.
Well, of course, if that's true, then maybe there should be a different approach. Should people really, and even in getting counseling, obviously they should be talking to a nutritionist or a doctor about their approach to this and finding out, both sides of this. So would it be more often than not? I mean, I guess the question I'm asking, is there really a necessity to these drugs? Are there really a necessity to it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And necessity is such an interesting word. So I think overall, if a person is taking the medication the way it has been studied, so the way it has been FDA approved, again, with those specific parameters, those specific patient populations, if someone is taking it in their comprehensive diabetes regimen, or, so that's for Ozempic, or if Wegovy, if they're doing that, then I would love to think that it could be a good fit for them. So necessary is interesting because I don't know if it's ever necessary. However, I do think there are certain subpopulations that would benefit from this very well. I just think that if they are going to move forward with it, it has to be, okay, so you're taking this medication. What are you doing in addition to prevent, this accelerated muscle loss, for example?
So they have to have a good management approach to it.
Exactly, which is why I call it like a comprehensive or whole person approach, where medications are always a part of the story, but they certainly should not be the entire story.
And what have you seen in your research to this? Because people who are overweight and have been overweight for a while, and now you have these new medications that some people will abuse them. So what have you seen in terms of your own research or the data as to how people have been doing with this? Are they more positive, or is it a mixed bag?
I think the research is still ongoing as to how the patients that are taking it, for those that are not taking it, or rather, I'm getting twisted up. So for those patients that are taking it, but they are not taking it the way that it is FDA approved, that research is still very much ongoing because, the drugs are new. So even for the drugs, if we want to just talk about those first and foremost, we don't really have long-term outcomes on them. And so right now it seems like, oh, great, it works for, XYZ populations. However, we don't actually know how it's going to impact someone 1 decade later. We still don't have that kind of information just because the drugs and the mechanism and all of that is still very new. So that's one of my worries about it. And then the other thing too is, because we have the research on for the patients who should be prescribed the medication as per the FDA, we have that data, at least for short term, to know it will help them with, diabetes and weight loss for Ozempic and Wegovy respectively. But we don't know, again, the short-term or potentially long-term benefits from an evidence-based perspective for those who are taking it, who are not meant to be taking it.
Well, which was going to be my next question. You have these people who are so obsessed about their physical appearance that they, quote unquote, feel fat, but they're not fat at all. What's the approach to that? What should a doctor or a pharmacist, somebody comes to a pharmacist and they want a prescription. First of all, this has to be prescribed. I should ask that question.
Yes, it does. Exactly.
It has to be prescribed.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when a person comes with a prescription and they obviously are not a person who appears that they should be taking that medication? What do you do?
So from a pharmacist perspective, what do is you have to speak with the healthcare provider who wrote the prescription and confirm, does this actually fit for this patient? And that's a huge role that a pharmacist plays in the entire schema of GLP-1s. But if you take it back even a step before that, is that it's up to the healthcare provider's clinical discretion. So they can write it if they seem or think that they, deem it appropriate. And so everyone's definition of appropriate is quite different these days. And so if a healthcare provider is like, okay, this person is going to pay out of pocket, this helps my bottom line of my practice, this also makes my patient happy, increases patient satisfaction, all of those things, maybe they'll be more inclined to write it. But I think that healthcare providers see the boom and they see the potential benefit. And so it's really going to come down to, is the healthcare provider comfortable with writing it? And then is the pharmacist going to be comfortable with filling it? So kind of going past those two barriers of entry for the patient. See, the thing is, if a patient is interested, at least what I've seen with this is because it is so popular now, is oftentimes the patient is coming into the healthcare provider office and asking, oh, my friend is on it. Oh, I read about it in a magazine. I read about it on Instagram. Like, I would love to be on this medication. And that's the moment where the healthcare provider, or if it's later down the line, the pharmacist, can interject and say, actually, I think from my clinical perspective, you are not the right fit for this. And then it's possible then the patient might go to another provider. We don't know that part, but it's really up to what is going to be the best fit for the patient and who's going to write the prescription, or maybe who won't write it.
Well, Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz, I hope I pronounced your name.
Your pronunciation was perfect. I don't think anyone has ever said it better.
I was practicing all day. But certainly I want to thank you. How can our audience learn more about you, and how can they reach out to you?
Yes, definitely. So you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Dr. Swathi, so doctor spelled out. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can just search my name and you'll find me. And so there I frequently conduct webinars on longevity and muscle health with MyOSMD. So if you want to learn more about anything that we talked about today, please feel free to ask to connect and follow along there. And any of the studies that I mentioned as well, you can find, especially the ones on corticotropin or muscle health, you can find at myosmd.com. So that's myosmd.com.
Okay, very much. We certainly welcome you and appreciate you coming on to give us more information about this. And folks, we'll put your information in the chat, and they will be able to reach out to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, have a good night. All right, folks, that was Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz. So if you want to get more information, you can check her out. I think it's certainly an important a piece that we need to do. I know several people who, I don't know whether or not they are taking these types of medication, but certainly I know a few people who have lost an incredible amount of weight in a very short period of time. Not sure if that's very healthy, but then I've also seen at least one of those persons where they have put a considerable amount of the weight back on. All right. So, all right, listen, we're going to be picking up your phone calls on the other side of the break, but I want to talk about some things going back to the election. Is that things that we need to really understand that elections matter, because when you're electing a person, it is not just one person. That one person is going to impact and put people in place to help them continue to govern. And they're going to have people in place that will help them continue to govern along the vision that they see that we uh, need to provide the solutions to. So when you are casting a ballot, it is not just a person, because politicians and candidates will make a lot of promises, will make promises that some they can deliver, some that they can't deliver, and some that they are going to need, most that they're going to need to have Congress to support. So a president proposes and Congress disposes. A president proposes policy and Congress disposes of those policies, whether they support and pass the agenda. So uh, while you during a presidential election, you hear a lot about the presidential candidates, but even the candidates that who you may be supporting, they're going to need people in Congress that is going to work to support and move their agenda forward. So you got to make sure that we elect the right people in Congress. You got to make sure that we elect people who want to be productive in Congress. We have to clean out Congress the same way that we have to rid ourselves of this toxicity in terms of the presidential campaign or the president's office, so that the president's office does not become someone's revenge position, that they can just act out vengeance on people that they consider to be their personal enemy, rather than having somebody who is in the office respecting the office of the presidency, to making sure that every decision that they make is a decision that they are considering the entire population, and certainly by extension, they're considering how we impact the world, because the world looks to the United States for guidance, and they certainly look to the United States as a model. So when you are voting for a candidate, you're not just voting for the candidate, you're voting for, you need to vote for people who are going to support that agenda going forward. So in Congress, we need to make sure that we elect people to go into the Senate, to the Congress, that people who want to move things forward. The people that a lot of these people who are in place, or I should say some of them, look at just what's happening. We're talking about disaster relief, where millions or thousands of people, as a result of 2 hurricanes and tornadoes, lives were upended. And some lives were lost. But certainly people who now, in the wake of the storm, their storm is going to last for years. Right now, today, even though the storm happened over a week ago, right now there are still people who are having to live in temporary housing. They're going to be living in temporary housing for an extended period of time. It is going to take years to put their communities back together. It will eventually happen, but it's going to be years. We're talking about years. I'm talking about 10, 15 years. There are some people who may never get back, or just have to relocate. But you have over 400 and some odd members in Congress, 400 and some odd members. You have 220 Republicans in the House. Over half of the Republicans voted against funding FEMA's disaster relief to help people, to give people the necessary. Why? Who knows? Probably to make some sort of political point. These are not people that we need to have stewarding in our government. Doesn't make any difference what your political ideology is. That's not ideology that is political. That is outright disgusting that you would have people who would politicize aiding people who are in very desperate condition. You should want that person to be in charge of governing and providing, because that's what people do. Those, whether we like it or not, those are the people that we select. You have to be very, very thoughtful about that and consider that when you go into the polls to cast your ballot. Do you want for somebody who's going to work to do things decently and in orderly and how it benefits people, or are you a person who is attracted to that? Because maybe you just are a person who's attracted to someone who just does not care about rules. Maybe that's why that person is receiving the kind of support, because there are people who just don't care about rules, and they like the idea of there is a person who represents that, and they say whatever they want to say. They don't care about rules. They're not going to maintain rules. They are going to go against every established protocol that there is. And that is what has happened here. The man has defeated everybody, convicted. He's a convicted felon, sued, owes hundreds of millions of dollars in fines and restitution. Is about to be sentenced for a crime over in New York. Been indicted on 80-something federal charges, and yet he has still at the top of the heap for the Republican Party. This is a person who, in their mind, that they believe that they're untouchable, And I hope that we as the American people say, maybe it was a little entertaining, but we certainly are not going to allow for this to be our reality. So, because again, the next president is going to probably nominate 2 Supreme Court justices. And if Donald Trump becomes that president, that means that they will have that he will appoint 2 people that will probably be there for 30, 40, 50 years. And they will undo many of the policies that have been put into place that are going to help poor people, Black people, children. So this is what is certainly at stake. The president, again, Congress, many of the things that they want to do in terms of policy, they've got to go through Congress. But there are things that the president doesn't have to go through Congress. They have enormous influence over the Department of Justice. They have enormous influence when it comes to immigration, or certainly executive orders to deal with immigration, or the Department of Justice to deal with going after their political enemies. And they don't have to go through Congress to do any of those things. So they do have enormous power over those 2 agencies and many more, and to appoint people in place in the other areas of government to carry out their Project 2025 extreme agenda. So you're talking about fascism, um, fascism on steroids. That's what you can look like. You can look at. Now, for some people, it's not going to bother their or impact their lives for 1 minute. So they think. Just because they're doing okay economically, they may be doing okay socially. But I believe that the clock will certainly be, or there certainly will be an attempt to turn it back. But I believe that they will do such an erosion that it will be problematic for us as a whole. As a whole. So um, make sure you consider that when you go to cast your ballot. Um, so, got to point to some things here locally. I want to talk about some things locally. The City Council and certainly the Committee on Transportation voted today in an 8-5 vote to advance a proposal to reduce the speed limits from 30 to 25 miles an hour on roads that are certainly controlled by the city of Chicago. This does not apply to state controlled or state owned roads, only to those that are controlled and owned by the city of Chicago. Now, I know that when you ask the average person what they think about such things, and we think about it, oh, they're going to propose reducing the speed limit and so that to make our streets safer. On the surface, that really sounds good on the surface. But the reality is that we have not a problem with the average everyday working person or the average driver that are reckless. This is a policy that is put in place under the disguise that this is going to save lives and that it is going to reduce crashes and fatalities. And that could not be furthest from the truth. Why? Because the people who are the reckless drivers in Chicago knows that Chicago, starting with Richard Daley, expanded by Rahm Emanuel, put on steroids by Lori Lightfoot, and now being enabled or continually enabling by Mayor Brandon Johnson. What do they have in common? Brandon Johnson, Lori Lightfoot, and even Rahm Emanuel, all while campaigning, said that they didn't agree with always using fines and fees to tax and balance a budget. But they all, after they got elected, fell in line and became addicted. With a shot in the arm, became addicted after one shot to the Department of Transportation on red light cameras and speed cameras. Now, make no mistake about this. This is not about safety. This is not about safety. If it were about safety, we would have an improved safety record after 21 years of photo enforcement, of red light cameras, and after, 13 years of speed cameras. So we have the largest red light camera program than any other city in these United States of America. We have 160 some odd speed cameras that they're now shuffling around and looking for places where there are high traffic volumes so that they can put them there and generate more revenue. This is not about safety. This is using safety as a disguise to put into place an increased revenue generating platform as known as speed cameras. So if they're going to reduce the speed limit from 30 miles an hour, which are park zones are 30 miles an hour, and if you go 6 miles over the speed limit, or 6 to 9 miles over the speed limit, you get a $35 ticket. Go 11 miles over, and it is a $100 ticket. Now it is going to be reduced, and which will go into effect January 26th if it is passed. I would say to all of us to understand that this is not about safety, no matter what and how it may sound. It is a placebo approach and a placebo of a stupid idea, thinking that somehow because you're going to cause the flow of traffic to be even more stagnant in this city. And on top of that, they're going to generate a lot more revenue in the park zones as it relates to speed cameras. That's what this is all about. That is precisely what this is all about. This is not about saving lives. The city of Chicago, the city council, if they cared about saving lives, then what they would be doing is enforcing comprehensive safety patrol ideas rather than the schemes that they're putting together under the disguise that we are going to promote safety. It is far from that. We have 170 speed cameras. Lori Lightfoot lowered the threshold from 10 miles to 6 to 9 miles over. As a result, they started collecting 11,000 tickets a day when they were doing 1,000 tickets a day. Traffic crashes increased, tripled, which had nothing to do with the cameras, nothing to do with the locations of the cameras, before or after any of the changes. It is a placebo of an approach just like ShotSpotter. The only people who want to keep ShotSpotter is because it gives them a feeling that they are safer, when in fact their safety is not impacted one way or the other. This idea of reducing the speed limit from 30 to 25 is inextricably tied to generating revenue and taxing the average working person, to making sure that we pay a toll when we go back and forth to work, go back and forth to the doctor, go back and forth picking your children up from school and taking them to their events. This doubling down on the average working person, I sent the mayor a response to this. I probably won't get a response from him for quite some time, if at all. But the point is that I wrote to the mayor and told him that this was a silly idea, and that this was purely what it's for, to be a money grab. All we do is police for profit in Chicago. There is no policing for safety. They're not interested in safety. The mayor and the city council are basically saying to you, you know what? You can run those red lights. Just make sure you give us the money. You can drive reckless and you can speed. Just make sure you get enough tickets. Give us the money. We'll give you a pass. You can go on and drive as reckless as you know how. Just pay us. That's largely what this is. That's exactly what this is. Look, there are 19,400 communities in this United States of America. Only 150 of them are using these type of machinery. 150 out of 19,400 and some odd communities right here in Chicago. So the mayor talks about, and even in his campaign, talking about helping the average working person and getting people out of poverty. Not when you support programs like this that are counterproductive and that jeopardizes the livelihood of people who can least afford this. That's what this is, Mayor Johnson. You are wrong to support such a policy that is going to impact largely poor people and Black and brown people. Because specifically, that is really what it is that you want to do. But you know that if you went to the community and said to the community that you want to do a block party for the reunion, nobody would show up. Nobody would show up. So, so this idea that the mayor has come up with, well, I'm not going to say that the mayor came up with it. Certainly the Department of Transportation, lobbied by some bicyclist group that some very wealthy donor has provided them with the resources to be able to propose these silly type policies. I don't know, maybe we can get us a huge donor that will be able to support us in doing the work, that we can go out and we can be an advocate for comprehensive protections in the city where we live. So I plan on having a conversation with Mayor Johnson, and we may even do some sort of press conference. We may do a press conference on this because it is a bad policy. It is wrong to tax the average everyday working person who's just trying to get back and forth to work, take the children to school, go grocery shopping. And when they get home in a couple of weeks, they'll find out that they had to pay a $35 or $100 toll. And it's going to be a lot because the park zones are now going to get and approve even more wealth as it sits now because of this change that they're being proposed. Now, again, when I say now, that's going to go into effect, or at least it's supposed to go into effect until January. Hopefully the mayor will come to a different level of understanding this and recognize that this is not good for the city. Hopefully that is the case. So I wrote the mayor. We'll see if he responds with a comment or if he just responds acknowledging that he received it. Maybe I can look now and go to and see if in fact he did. Let's see. Did the mayor? Let's see if he did. Nope. I don't think that he did. Okay, just wanted to just make sure. All right, so but I want to ask you. I want to ask each of you. Here comes the 10 by 10 to win theory. I want to ask each of you to call your aldermanic office and reject this idea. Now, this is where we can really flex our muscle if, in fact, we put it together the way that we should put it together. So, excuse me, that means that we have to add more people. But I want for everybody to call your aldermanic office and reject this idea of lowering the speed limits for safety, because it's not about safety, period. It's not about safety. This is purely about a big, huge money grab. Big, huge money grab. That's what this is about. All right, so listen, I want you to call your aldermanic office. I want to call your alderman. In fact, call your alderman's office downtown. They will be at City Council. I believe it's this Wednesday. And they may be voting on this policy. But I would say call your alderman. Tell your alderman that they better vote no on against lowering the speed limit. And if they don't vote no, then we can vote no to them when that time comes. When that time comes, we can vote no to them when the election gets here. All right, so all right, let's see. We're going to go 951-221-8221 is the number. 951-221-8221. I just want to say hello to those of you who may be online. I want to just say hello to you and welcome you to the program. So, it is amazing to me. It's amazing to me that we have a government that looks for just looking for somebody to punish. We have people in place. Now, you know, I supported Brandon Johnson, and still, by extension, support him, because there are certain things. There was an interview that he did last week, and I applaud him for standing up on principles that he believes. I applaud him for that. But what I don't applaud is that you made a commitment, and you made this commitment while on, yeah, while on the premises. So we certainly should galvanize ourselves together. I mean, galvanize ourselves together if we have to go down and converge on the city council, or we go down to drop off our own score, right? So we should not allow for them to get away with doing this. We should not allow for them to get away with doing this. Here's Alderman Laspada, who proposes this ward. Why? Because he probably will stand up and tell the same stupid story that he got hit by a car when he was a teenager, which was 50 years ago, because he certainly knows spring chicken. Tonight. All right, listen, we are at 951-221-8221. We're probably going to be ending the program at 8:30. Next week, we're going to have another guest. So make sure that you tune in to the podcast. But we are going to end tonight. We're going to end a little bit early tonight. But what I want to make sure that I leave you with is that you have some semblance of what's going to happen depending upon who gets elected. The next president will appoint 2 United States Supreme Court justices. We will either have a Supreme Court that's more balanced out, or we will have a Supreme Court that is a sycophant. Judges. There have been more than let's see, there were there have been 80 some odd new judges put on the bench. 50 some odd were women, 38 or something like that were men put as judges. And those judges get assigned somewhere by somebody. So I'm telling you that when you go to cast your ballot, consider across the board and not just one person, because that one person only has as much power that the city council gives them. That's what they have. All right, listen, that's going to do it for me tonight. We're going to be ending a little bit early. I want to thank you all for tuning in to the podcast. Listen, coming up on Thursday night, we are hoping to put together another forum for candidates that are in the 9th district, and we do it virtually. We do it online. On Zoom. I had a little brain freeze, but on Zoom. So if you want to get to participate in the 10 by 10 to win meeting, we would love to have you. I'm just going to put it in a text, and then that way you can get it yourself. So text 10x10 to let's see, 855-909-1382. All right, so that you can get into you can get into the text alert. Let me make sure that I gave you the right number. Did I give you the right number? For some reason, I'm thinking that I did not give you the right number. So it may be. So I may have to correct that. 9. Let's see here. Let's try it right here. Okay. Just give me 1 minute. 855. Whoa. I knew that I had something wrong. Okay. Let's try it again. 10x10 to 855-909-1385. Okay. There you go. 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. Okay. That's where it is. 909-1385, not 1382. Text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. My apologies. All right. Love to see you all Thursday night. Thursday night, we have our 10 by 10 to win Zoom meeting. And 10 by 10 to win is the idea of building, organizing to unite a Black independent voting bloc in the city of Chicago, the county of Cook, and the state of Illinois, so that we can select, slate, and elect people who are going to deem the interests of our community and respect our community. And I believe that if we were to mobilize the 10 by 10 to win voting bloc, there's not a single law office that will not respond to us if we have significant numbers. And to start, we should have 10,000 people from every ward that we occupy, which are about 20 wards. That the mayor should not be able to go along with programs that we resist and that he promised that he wouldn't do. He's breaking his promise. We need to be able to hold people like that, whether it would be the mayor, whether it be people in the Congress, accountable. Right now, they do whatever they want to do, and they happen to write us if, in fact, they want to. So, but it's important. It's important for us to organize, because guess what? You have to pay attention to what's going on in local elections as well. Yes, the federal election is extraordinarily important, but we need to be focused on what's happening in our community as it relates to the things that we want, or certainly as it relates to the people who are supposed to be representing the community. And those who are supposed to be representing the community are responsible to the community, not responsible to somebody else and represent something that is antithetical to what the community is looking for. The only way that you change that is that you have to amass power. You have to amass power that forces for a mayor not to do something as silly as supporting lowering the speed limit. And they're lowering the speed limit for one reason only, and that one reason so that they can generate more revenue. That is why they are showing a sense of grace. So that's what we need to do, is to build our own union. And I'm suggesting that we start with 200,000. That means 10,000 people from each ward. 10,000 people times the 20 wards where we largely populate here in Chicago is 200,000 people. 200,000 vote can determine any election, from the city council to the Cook County Board to the water reclamation to the state board, any one of those. All right, so Thursday night, be my guest. Thursday night, text 10x10 to the number 855-909-1385. Please join us. Please join us. 855-909-1385. All right, that's got to do it for me tonight. I want to thank you all for tuning into the program. I want to thank Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz for coming on to help us with the weight gain loss and what the side effects are. Certainly want to thank her for that, and certainly want to thank you all for tuning into the program and sticking here with me. You can take a look, you can follow it, and you can look at the program on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and I just had some thought freeze. All right, but that's going to do it for me tonight. See, I want to thank you for joining me here live on intellectualradio.com, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you very much. Have a good night.